Hello, is this, hi, oh, there you are. Hi, I am Stephanie, and welcome to Modern Authenticity. Today, for our very first podcast, we are going into the idea of past lives. Now, for those people that have never heard of past lives, it's exactly what it sounds like. The belief system is that you lived a life before the one you're living now. Now, the details of it all, the how many you may have lived, and the who's, the what's, the where's, that's all up for debate. Well, as the topic itself is. But today we're going to explore a story that actually happened to me, which was crazy. And then you got my friend Philo, who came over to talk with me about past lives, because she will always be my companion in any sort of weird metaphysical thing I want to discover. And so she comes over and ends up dropping some crazy stories herself. So here we go. One of my first past life memories that sporadically happened was when I was 32 years old and I had just gone through a breakup. The relationship to begin with was rough, as my family and my friends didn't really like this particular person. They had their various reasons, but the overall theme that I found to be really interesting and will play a pivotal point in the story was there just seemed to be a contrast between him and I. I was a very driven businesswoman, and I seemingly had it together. And he was, he was very artistic, which is what I loved, but he was kind of a farm boy a little bit. He kind of was always struggling financially, which, listen, I've been there. There's no judgment. But, it was just, we were just really different in kind of where we were. And again, I bring this up because it ends up playing a very pivotal part in the past life that I ended up remembering. After we finally decided to break up, I was lying on my bed trying to have some reprieve from that, pain in your chest that doesn't seem to give up. And it was the weirdest thing. It was like this swoosh of light or energy. It's hard to describe, just came into the room. And it was almost like it came in and I remembered. I was a young woman in what I think is about the 1500s, and I was in this cathedral. Think Notre Dame, okay? Giant, beautiful European cathedral. And I automatically knew I was of, higher nobility, if you will. I was a lady, and again, I don't know that part of history as well. This is just what I got from the memory. And I was kneeling and I was praying. I was pretty religious, as I think people were back in that day. And I kind of had not a veil over my face, but it was like maybe a hood. Perhaps it was like a cape. And I was praying, and I was pretty sad because I knew the person I loved I couldn't be with. And when I was thinking about that, I looked over in this very detailed cathedral. I mean, I can literally see the pointed, humongous ceiling. I can see the candles burning in front of me. And I look over and I see him. It was the guy that I had just broken up with in my present day life, but in a different body. And to be honest with you, he was so covered in rags, and he also had a hood on, that it was hard to see him. But I saw his eyes. And when I looked into his eyes, I knew who he was. I knew who he was. And what is even crazier is I was kneeling and I looked over to him. And he looked at me, and I knew we had fallen in love somehow in that life back in the 1500s. But I knew I could not be with him. And he looked at me in that past life, and he was, dirty and in these rags. And I remember him looking at me and just knowing, he was like telling me with his eyes, I love you. And I'm not going to make this any harder on you. I'm going to walk away. Because he knew, and we both knew, we could not be together. And that was one of the first past life memories that I ever had. And it was so detailed. And when people talk about past life memories, they often talk about how it's all the senses. But it's even, I would say, all the senses, including your sixth sense, because you are getting this you're getting so many feelings and knowings of what is around you. And once I remembered that, it was the feeling of, oh my God, that's what happened. It wasn't like a really like cool, interesting dream. It was like the epiphany of, oh my God, it makes sense. That's what happened. It was like you forgot where you put your keys, and then you go, oh, right, that's where. That is the feeling. And what I always say, as far as like when people ask you how you know, was it a daydream? Was it a dream? You know when you're watching a movie, and you know when you're having a dream. And that is the difference. This is just something, these past life memories, these are just something that we don't have in our everyday life. So the analogy is a little bit harder for people to realize. That was the first past life memory that I ever had that detailed and that full of life. It was its own life. It's kind of like when people forget certain things, or they forget certain memories, and then a smell or something happens, and it's almost like I remember that, but just not from this life. You walk into a house and you smell muffins and you think, oh, grandma. Well, it's almost like I had recognized this heartache before, just not in this life. It was in a different life. So yeah, that was a lot. And then Philo told me that she had a crazy story. And OMG, it was freaking crazy. So just a little setup here for my friend Felicina, who goes by Philo, same person. She is from Venezuela, but her family was living in Lebanon. Her and her sisters and her mom and dad all went back to Venezuela to see some distant relatives that they had never met. And here we go.
We were like visiting my dad's cousin, and my dad's cousin decided to invite all like his family to meet us, the girls who they've never met, right? So we get to his apartment and we open the door and this guy walks in. And I'm like, cool, wow, I have so much family here. Like in my head, I'm like, so many different people. And he was like staring at me like, this is really awkward. Like he's looking at me like this. And I'm like, in my head, I just didn't know what it meant. Whatever, weirdo, right? And then I remember getting out of the elevator and his parents had arrived. And they were at the balcony. And then I remember like walking outside and they all looked at me. And the mom started crying. The dad started crying. And the guy just like continued his sniffles. And I'm like, what the fuck? Is there something on my face? And they're like, they just cried. And I just like went inside, like, and they're talking Spanish, and I wasn't very like fluent in Spanish. And then my mom like started talking to them, and I remember just like watching them, and they're like looking back and like they're all like and then what happened is that my mom came inside and she's like, hey, so let me tell you something. So these people think like you look a lot like their daughter. And my mom's like, you don't necessarily look like her, but you remind them of her in a very like,
it's an energy,
intense way, like to the point where they're all crying, like old people, like like that. And I'm like, I want to learn more. Like, okay, tell me about this person, right? And apparently she was 24-ish, and she was on a trip with her husband. I think it was their honeymoon. And she's a scuba diver. She loves going underwater. As she was swimming, the most like traumatic thing happened. She gets hit by like a yacht or like a boat. And like, it's too disturbing, but her head gets cut off.
Oh
like,
my God.
Or like
decapitated, right?
Decapitated by the hit. And her fiance was like near her.
Oh my God.
And it was very traumatic. And apparently it was a little kid that was like 13 years old who stole his dad's yacht that day, and then it ended up killing her by like mistake.
Oh no.
Not knowing what he did. I was like, okay. And she died like when she was 24, and like years later I was born.
Right.
So I was like, interesting, right? And I've always had fear of water that was like unjustifiable. I remember looking at the edge of the, like at the end of the pool with my goggles, and I'm like, I don't want to go there. Like like, I'm so afraid of like deep waters. Like, I just hate it. It's like my biggest fear since I was young. So here's an interesting thing. Like, my neck has always been like weird. In what sense? Like, every time I go to the doctor, they're like, what's up with your neck? Do you have like a thyroid problem? Always ask me about it. It's been like such a recurring thing that I'm like, what is wrong with my neck? But here's the weird thing. So I don't know if you can see it, but I have a very strong, deep
Oh my
wrinkle.
god. Guys, if you could see this mark on Felicina's neck, it literally, yeah, it's like a wrinkle, but it's so much deeper. You know, Philo's in her early 20s, and it's completely unnatural for something to be like that. It's bizarre looking, especially now that I know the story, and I've always noticed it, but you know, don't want to say anything. It is clear as day.
It's like, and I've always had it. It's something so unnatural, like,
Right.
like, I don't know, old people might have like necklines,
Of course.
but mine
No.
has been.
That is different than necklines.
Yeah, that's like and if you look at it,
It's almost like an indentation.
Yeah, and I've been looking at it, and it looks like a scar.
It does look like a scar.
And here's something like really disturbing that happened. So when she died, they wanted like an open coffin, or what do you call it?
Yeah, an open casket.
Casket, but like her head like had to be like sewn back,
Right.
just so her parents wanted to see her.
Right.
You know. Could
That's
be
crazy.
it? Because like it's so deep. If you touch it, it's like deep. And here's the weirdest part of the whole fucking thing.
I don't even say. I'm glad I'm sitting down.
To me, it's like, okay, what is my husband's favorite thing to do? Go scuba diving. It never really dawned on me that I might be having a past life, but could it be because I was born like years later after she died, and it's a sudden death and having that mark?
Yeah.
So here's what happened. When I was in school, I was studying special effects makeup.
Yeah.
I've never really like, I used to participate like doing the makeup, but I was never like the model.
Right.
And one day she's like, okay kids, today we're gonna do a special effects makeup about, you know, being drowned, like doing like a drowned effect. And she's like, she looked around the class and she's like, Philo,
Oh my god.
here.
Oh my god.
And I'm like, wait, what? And she's like, can you sit here? And I was so nervous. Not only did she make me look like I drowned, she made me decapitated drowned.
You are kidding.
I swear to God. I have the photo somewhere, and I looked at myself in the mirror, and I'm like, why me? Like, and then that's after that I went to Venezuela and learned about it. Like a few months after.
So the makeup thing happened first. Bizarre, and then you went
like full on,
my God, dude. That
full
is
on like
crazy.
blue, like and decapitated. And I'm like, why me? Like,
why drowning and decapitation? I don't even associate decapitation with drowning.
Yeah.
I don't even associate it like that, dude. That's crazy.
It was beyond me. And when she was doing my makeup, she literally mentioned my neck. And she's like, oh, that's great. You already have that line on your neck that's going to help us, you know, position whatever.
So a note about birthmarks. Some people who do believe in past lives believe that birthmarks are actually marks from the past lives, whether they be a mark of where you were stabbed with a sword or, you know, a mark where you had a surgery, etc., things like that. Philo's mark, her line on her neck, I cannot stress enough, really did. It looks like a scar almost. It looks like someone, although it sounds kind of bizarre, carved around her neck. So yeah, that's it, kids. That's where we're at with things. I remembered a life, and Felicina had her life remembered for her. Anyway, I don't know. Do you believe in past lives? Did you have a past life memory you want to share? I'm definitely open to questions, topics, or people that want to chat about it. I find it fascinating and intriguing, and it definitely is an interesting school of thought to think that we've all lived before. I hear all the time my friends say that their children are born with their own little personalities. I know myself, I had certain things about me that I was like, I never really understood where they came from. Why am I this way when none of my family is? Why do I know certain information? Why do I have certain insight? And if you hear about it, actually, parents everywhere usually will have stories about this regarding their children. Unfortunately, it's just something that parents are too afraid to talk about, which is sad, and I hope we can change that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I actually have scheduled an upcoming past life regression that I'm doing next week. So stand by for a full report. And, if it goes well, obviously, I'll let you guys know who did it. So if you're interested in doing it for yourself, I will have the info for you. And thank you for listening. I really appreciate it, as this is the first podcast or episode I've ever done. And it's kind of like your firstborn child. You just kind of experiment. I'm the firstborn, so don't be offended. Anyway, thank you so much for listening, and also thank you so much, Felicina, for coming along this journey with me and chatting, and hopefully we will have more episodes to come. All right, thanks for clicking in? You know what? How about this? Bye!